Did Hollywood just suffer its most humiliating collapse in decades? 2023 was not a normal bad year. It was the year billion-dollar brands started bleeding in public. Marvel stumbled, DC cracked, Disney's magic faded, and legendary franchises suddenly looked fragile. In this countdown, we're exposing the biggest box office disasters that shook the industry, and the number one failure proved something Hollywood desperately wanted to deny. Number 17. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. The first warning sign came from the ocean, and almost nobody showed up to hear it. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken looked like DreamWorks trying to launch a bright new animated heroine in a world already crowded with sequels, superheroes, and streaming distractions. The idea had color, family appeal, underwater fantasy, and a coming-of-age hook, but the marketing never made it feel urgent. Parents did not rush, kids did not obsess, and the movie quickly sank beneath louder summer titles. Against its reported budget, the worldwide return was painfully weak, turning a harmless, animated adventure into a financial bruise. The real disaster was not that audiences hated it. The disaster was that most of them barely knew it existed. Number 16. Knights of the Zodiac. Some flops crash loudly. Knights of the Zodiac vanished so quietly it almost became a mystery. Built from a globally known anime property, the film clearly wanted to become the start of a flashy fantasy action franchise. It had armor, mythology, chosen one drama, and enough visual ambition to suggest a much bigger universe waiting behind it. But mainstream audiences were never convinced that this was their next obsession. Fans were cautious, casual viewers were confused, and the box office numbers were brutal compared with the reported cost. Instead of launching a cinematic universe, it became a warning label for Hollywood's adaptation obsession. Recognizable source material means nothing if the audience does not feel emotionally invited into the world. Number 15. Renfield. Nicolas Cage as Dracula should have been a marketing gift from the movie gods. Weird, loud, meme-ready, and impossible to ignore. Renfield had one of those concepts that sounds instantly clickable. Dracula's loyal servant finally realizes he's trapped in the world's most toxic relationship and tries to escape his immortal boss. That is funny. That is strange. That is modern. And with Cage leaning into the theatrical madness of the vampire legend, the film seemed built for viral attention. But internet curiosity does not always become ticket sales. The movie had blood, comedy, action, and a surprisingly sharp emotional metaphor, yet it never became an urgent theatrical event. Audiences talked about the idea more than they actually showed up for the movie. That is the painful gap Hollywood keeps running into. A trailer can get laughs, a casting choice can trend, and a concept can sound brilliant in a headline, but viewers still may decide to wait for streaming. Renfield earned only around its production cost worldwide before marketing expenses and theater cuts, making the final picture much uglier than the surface numbers suggested. Its failure was not because the idea was boring. It failed because mid-budget genre movies have become dangerously easy to skip. Number 14. 65. Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs should have been one of the easiest sells of the year. That sentence alone sounds like a lost blockbuster from a more confident Hollywood era. A serious movie star, a crashed spaceship, prehistoric monsters, and a survival story where every shadow could hide teeth. But 65 proved that a strong concept is not the same as a gripping experience. The movie promised a brutal journey through an ancient Earth filled with danger, but the final result felt smaller and quieter than many viewers expected. Instead of becoming a wild sci-fi dinosaur event, it played more like a contained survival thriller with occasional bursts of creature action. That mismatch hurt it badly. The marketing suggested spectacle, but the movie itself did not generate enough excitement, conversation, or word of mouth to push casual audiences into theaters. With a reported budget around $45 million and only modest worldwide earnings, it needed stronger legs after advertising costs to look safe. The disaster was not that 65 became a legendary embarrassment. It was something more frustrating: wasted commercial potential. Dinosaurs, sci-fi, and Adam Driver should have created urgency. Instead, the movie became a reminder that audiences will not pay just because the pitch sounds cool. Number 13. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This is the most painful kind of box office disappointment. The one where the movie actually did many things right. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves had charm, humor, adventure, monsters, magic, betrayals, strange creatures, and a cast that understood the tone perfectly. It was not stiff fantasy, it was not cynical franchise bait. It felt playful, fast, and surprisingly sincere, giving audiences an old-fashioned quest movie with enough modern wit to feel fresh. Critics were kind, fans were pleased, and people who saw it often walked away saying the same thing. This was better than expected. But better than expected is not enough when the budget is around $150 million. At that size, the film needed to become a massive mainstream event, not just a movie people discovered too late. Its release landed in a marketplace where casual viewers were cautious, fantasy branding was not automatically powerful, and many audiences had already been trained to wait for home viewing. That made the numbers feel especially unfair. Dungeons and Dragons did not fail because it lacked heart. It failed because Hollywood spent like it had a guaranteed hit, while the public treated it like an optional adventure. Number 12. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Marvel's smallest hero accidentally exposed one of the studio's biggest weaknesses. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was not sold as a light, funny side mission. It was presented as a major turning point for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, a gateway into the next saga, and the grand arrival of Kang as the next terrifying franchise-level villain. That made the expectations enormous. But instead of feeling like a must-see event, the movie often felt strangely artificial, over-designed, and emotionally thin. The quantum realm looked expensive, but many viewers did not feel connected to it. The earlier Ant-Man films worked because they mixed superhero stakes with family comedy, street-level charm, and a smaller scale. Quantumania inflated everything, but inflation is not the same as impact. The opening weekend gave Marvel hope, but the audience drop afterward was brutal, showing weak word of mouth and fading enthusiasm. Financially, it was not the biggest bomb on the list, but for Marvel, the damage was deeper than the numbers. This was supposed to launch excitement for the future. Instead, it made people question whether the MCU had become too crowded, too complicated, and too dependent on setup. Quantumania did not just underperform. It made Marvel look vulnerable. Number 11. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The first Aquaman was a billion-dollar shockwave, the kind of surprise hit that made DC look stronger than anyone expected. The sequel arrived like a leftover from a universe already being dismantled. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom still had Jason Momoa, underwater kingdoms, giant creatures, fantasy battles, strange comic book visuals, and the memory of a massive global success behind it. But by the time it reached theaters, the old DC universe was already collapsing in public. Audiences knew a reboot was coming. They knew this version of the franchise had no clear future. That drained urgency from the entire release. Why rush to see the next chapter when the book itself already feels closed? The marketing felt muted, the buzz was weaker, and the excitement that once made Aquaman feel like a wild crowd pleaser had faded. International grosses helped soften the damage, but compared with the first film, the drop was impossible to ignore. It did not feel like a triumphant sequel. It felt like the final obligation of a dying timeline. Aquaman once proved DC could still surprise Hollywood. The Lost Kingdom proved even a billion-dollar surprise can lose its power when audience trust disappears. Number 10. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Tom Cruise ran, jumped, crashed, and risked his body for the big screen. And still, the numbers became uncomfortable. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 was not a bad movie, and that is what makes its box office story so fascinating. Critics praised the action, audiences respected the spectacle, and the stunt work gave Hollywood exactly the kind of theatrical experience people claim they want. But the budget was enormous, the title was long, and the release timing was brutal. Barbenheimer exploded soon after, swallowing the cultural conversation and taking premium screens away from Ethan Hunt's latest mission. Suddenly, a well-reviewed blockbuster started looking financially squeezed. Its worldwide gross was large, but against a reported budget near blockbuster danger territory, large was not enough. This entry proves a harsh truth about modern Hollywood. Even excellence becomes risky when spending gets out of control. Dead Reckoning did not fail creatively. It failed because the math was merciless. Number 9. Expendables. The explosions were loud, but the audience response was almost silent. Expendables came back waving the same old weapons: aging action icons, impossible shootouts, muscle-bound one-liners, and the promise of a throwback franchise that once felt like a fun reunion of cinema's toughest men. But by 2023, that novelty had faded badly. The first Expendables movies worked because they felt like an event. Stallone, Statham, Schwarzenegger, Willis, Lundgren, and other action legends sharing the same battlefield. The fourth film no longer carried that same electricity. Sylvester Stallone's role was reduced, the marketing felt tired, and the franchise looked less like a celebration and more like a product trying to remind people it still existed. Against a reported budget around $100 million, the worldwide box office landed at only a fraction of what it needed. That made the movie one of the clearest action flops of the year. The real damage was not just financial. Expendables proved that nostalgia has limits. You cannot keep selling yesterday's adrenaline forever if the audience no longer feels the danger today. Number 8. Killers of the Flower Moon. This was not a bad movie losing money. This was prestige cinema colliding with brutal box office reality. Killers of the Flower Moon had Martin Scorsese behind the camera, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro on screen, and a haunting true story about greed, murder, and betrayal in Osage history. Artistically, it carried weight. Culturally, it mattered. But financially, it was a far more complicated story. With a massive budget, reportedly around $200 million, the film needed more than critical praise to look safe in theaters. Its long runtime, heavy subject matter, and serious dramatic tone made it a challenging sell for casual moviegoers looking for easy entertainment. Apple could absorb the cost differently than a traditional studio because the film also supported its streaming strategy and awards image. But as a theatrical investment, the numbers looked painful. This is what makes the entry so fascinating. It was respected, discussed, nominated, and still financially dangerous. Killers of the Flower Moon did not fail because it lacked quality. It struggled because Hollywood's prestige ambitions had become incredibly expensive. Sometimes the movie is powerful, but the business model around it is the real disaster. Number 7. Napoleon. A conqueror marched into theaters, but the box office did not surrender. Napoleon had everything that usually makes Hollywood feel confident. Ridley Scott directing, Joaquin Phoenix playing one of history's most famous military figures. Grand battle scenes, royal politics, battlefield chaos, and the kind of prestige scale that screams award season. But the movie also carried a problem almost as heavy as Napoleon's own legend. It was too expensive, too divisive, and too difficult to sell as a mainstream crowd pleaser. Some viewers came expecting a sweeping historical epic, Others wanted a sharper character study. Many left debating the tone, the accuracy, and the strange emotional distance at the center of the film. That conversation helped keep Napoleon visible, but visibility does not always equal profit. With Apple backing the movie, the financial logic was different from a normal studio release, because streaming value and brand prestige mattered too. But as a theatrical event, the numbers looked underwhelming against the giant budget. The film had huge images, huge costumes, huge battles, and yet it never became a huge box office phenomenon. The real irony is brutal. Napoleon was about a man obsessed with conquest, but in theaters, it failed to conquer the audience. For Hollywood, it proved that even historical spectacle needs more than size. It needs emotional urgency. Number 6. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The first Shazam felt like a surprise party. The sequel felt like it arrived after the party had already ended. Shazam! Fury of the Gods had jokes, monsters, magical powers, family drama, and a hero who was supposed to bring lighter energy to DC's darker universe. But by 2023, the audience was tired, confused, and increasingly skeptical of superhero promises. The DC brand was in chaos. A reboot was already hanging over the franchise. Fans knew major changes were coming, which made this sequel feel less like a crucial chapter and more like a leftover from a world being quietly packed away. That is a deadly position for any blockbuster. The movie needed excitement, but it got hesitation. It needed urgency, but viewers sensed there were no real future stakes. Even the return of Zachary Levi's cheerful superhero persona could not overcome the feeling that the film belonged to an era that was already being replaced. With a reported budget around $125 million and a worldwide gross that could not justify the total cost after marketing, the financial damage was serious. But the symbolic damage was worse. Shazam! Fury of the Gods showed that superhero movies could no longer survive on costume, comedy, and brand recognition alone. If the audience thinks the universe no longer matters, they stop buying tickets before the battle even begins. Number 5. Haunted Mansion. Disney had the ghosts, the mansion, the cast, and one of the most recognizable theme park attractions in the world. Yet somehow, the movie still felt invisible. Haunted Mansion should have been an easy spooky season event, the kind of family-friendly supernatural adventure that parents, kids, Disney fans, and nostalgia lovers could all agree on. Instead, it arrived in theaters at one of the worst possible moments. Barbenheimer had just turned the box office into a cultural earthquake, and Haunted Mansion looked like the expensive guest nobody had room to notice. The timing alone was bizarre. A ghost story based on a beloved ride was pushed into the middle of summer instead of being saved for Halloween, where its atmosphere might have felt more natural and urgent. Even with names like Lakeith Stanfield, Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Rosario Dawson, and Jamie Lee Curtis, the movie never became a must-see event. It was not hated enough to become infamous, and it was not loved enough to become a sleeper hit. That is a dangerous middle ground. Against its massive cost, Deadline estimated Disney lost around $117 million, making this one of the studio's most painful misfires of the year. The scariest thing about Haunted Mansion was not inside the house. It was the realization that even Disney nostalgia could no longer guarantee a crowd. Number 4. Wish. This was supposed to be Disney's victory lap, but it turned into one of the year's most awkward warning signs. Wish was not just another animated movie. It was designed as a celebration of Disney's 100-year legacy, a return to stars, songs, magic, castles, talking companions, and the old fairy tale feeling that built the company's empire. On paper, that sounds impossible to fail. But audiences did not respond with the kind of emotional urgency Disney clearly expected. The animation style divided viewers. The songs did not explode into the culture like Frozen. The villain felt underwhelming to many fans, and the whole movie carried the strange pressure of being important before it had actually earned that importance. That is the problem with anniversary movies. They're supposed to feel timeless, not corporate. Wish looked like Disney asking viewers to applaud the brand itself, and in 2023, audiences were not in the mood to be told where the magic was. The numbers made the disappointment impossible to hide. Deadline estimated the film lost around $131 million, a brutal result for a movie built around Disney's own mythology. The failure hurt because it was symbolic. If a Disney fairy tale celebrating a century of Disney could not become a box office sensation, then the studio's animation crown was clearly wobbling. Wish did not just miss expectations. It made people question whether Disney still understood its own magic. Number 3. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The fedora returned, the theme music swelled, and Hollywood hoped nostalgia would do the rest. But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny proved that even one of cinema's most beloved heroes could not outrun bad math. Harrison Ford gave the film emotional weight, and for many longtime fans, seeing him return as Indy one last time carried real sentimental power. But sentiment is not the same as urgency. The movie arrived with a huge production cost, years of expectations, mixed buzz, and a franchise legacy that had already been complicated by Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Instead of feeling like an unstoppable final adventure, Dial of Destiny often felt like an expensive attempt to convince audiences that the past could be reopened one more time. The action was large, the de-aging technology became a talking point, and the farewell tone was clear. But younger viewers were not treating Indiana Jones like their essential franchise. Older fans were curious, but curiosity alone could not justify the scale of spending. With a reported budget near $300 million and Deadline estimating a loss around $143 million, this became one of the costliest legacy sequel disappointments of the year. The tragedy is that the film was meant to honor a legend. Instead, it exposed the danger of treating nostalgia like a blank check. Indiana Jones found many treasures, but this time, the box office was not one of them. Number 2. The Flash. This was supposed to be the movie that saved DC's future. Instead, it became a public autopsy of everything broken inside the brand. The Flash arrived carrying impossible pressure. Warner Brothers needed it to feel like a major event, a multiverse spectacle, a bridge between old DC and whatever came next. The marketing leaned heavily on nostalgia, especially Michael Keaton's return as Batman, hoping that one familiar cape could turn uncertainty into excitement. But audiences were not convinced. The DC universe already felt unstable, the reboot conversation was everywhere, and viewers could sense that this was less a beginning than a messy goodbye. That is deadly for a superhero film built on future importance. The movie offered time travel, alternate realities, emotional trauma, 2 versions of Barry Allen, and multiple Batman connections. But the conversation around it became louder than the movie itself. Instead of pure hype, it carried controversy, confusion, and fatigue. Even worse, the visual effects became a major criticism, making a hugely expensive blockbuster look strangely unfinished to many viewers. Deadline estimated the loss at around $155 million, turning The Flash into one of the most damaging superhero failures of the year. The cruel irony is that the film was built around speed, but its box office collapse happened even faster. This was not just a failed DC movie. It was proof that audiences had stopped trusting the promise of a cinematic universe that kept changing direction before their eyes. Number 1. The Marvels. The biggest disaster of the year did not come from a forgotten franchise, a risky original film, or a timey movie nobody expected to dominate. It came from Marvel, the studio that once looked almost impossible to defeat. The Marvels should have been protected by the strongest brand in modern blockbuster history. It had superheroes, cosmic action, franchise connections, a sequel linked to Captain Marvel, and the weight of the MCU logo above the title. For more than a decade, that logo was practically a box office weapon. But in 2023, the weapon misfired. Audiences were tired of homework-style storytelling, Disney Plus connections, endless universe setup, and movies that felt less like events and more like episodes in a crowded machine. The Marvels suffered from weak urgency, mixed audience interest, superhero fatigue, and a sense that Marvel's once unbreakable momentum had finally cracked. Even fans who did not hate the film could feel the larger problem. The MCU no longer made every new chapter feel essential. The numbers were brutal. It became the lowest-grossing movie in Marvel Cinematic Universe history, and Deadline estimated Disney lost around $237 million. That is why this belongs at number 1. The Marvels was not only a financial failure, it was a symbolic collapse. When Marvel's safest formula stopped feeling safe, Hollywood's entire blockbuster system looked exposed. The shocking truth was simple. Audiences had not abandoned theaters. They had abandoned automatic loyalty. 2023 did not kill Hollywood, but it exposed the cracks studios tried to hide. Audiences still showed up, just not for everything with a famous logo slapped on it. Superheroes stumbled, nostalgia weakened, and billion-dollar brands finally looked human. The lesson was brutal. Hype is no longer enough. The movie has to earn the ticket.